The forest at night has a weight. Not just the trees or the smell of damp pine needles, but a quiet pressure, a gravity of expectation pressing on the skin. We had hiked all day, following no trail, guided only by the fading sun and the promise of isolation. By the time we found a clearing suitable for our tent, the last streaks of daylight were gone, leaving only the diffuse glow of the moon spilling silver across the uneven ground. The tent was small, dome-shaped, a flimsy barrier of synthetic fabric against the dark. I struggled with the stakes, feeling the cold bite of the earth through my gloves. Marcus, ever methodical, arranged our sleeping bags inside, humming softly under his breath. I paused to look around. The trees crowded in like sentinels, their branches shifting with a faint whispering wind. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped, startling me, and a distant owl answered. By the time the tent was secured, night had settled fully. The forest seemed to inhale around us, a deep, slow breath. Marcus lit the lantern, its weak light struggling against the darkness. We ate silently, the crunch of jerky and the scrape of tin plates unnervingly loud in the still air. Outside, shadows pooled beneath the trunks, blotches of ink stretching across the uneven terrain. It was then I noticed it. The tent cast two shadows. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks, the flicker of the lantern shifting the fabric just so. But the second shadow was distinct, a perfect mimic of the first, yet slightly delayed, almost hesitant. I pointed it out to Marcus, trying to laugh it off. "It's just the angle of the light," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Maybe the moon." But the moon was thin, a sliver barely visible above the treetops. I could see the first shadow stretching tall and lanky along the ground, the second moving independently, jerking slightly as if unsure of its own form. We went to sleep reluctantly, the tent fabric vibrating softly with our movements. I felt a tightness in my chest as I tried to ignore it, but the second shadow pressed at the edge of my awareness, a silent companion in the dark. Marcus stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent. Hours later, I woke. The lantern had burned down, leaving only moonlight diffused through the thin nylon. The forest was quiet, but the air felt charged, alive with a tension I couldn't place. I squinted at the tent wall. The second shadow was there, more defined than before. Crouched slightly, leaning forward, its form impossibly precise. I hadn't moved. Marcus was asleep beside me, his chest rising and falling in regular rhythm. I whispered his name. The shadow flinched, recoiling as if it had been listening. My heart slammed in my chest. I reached out to shake him awake. He stirred, groaning, and I thought perhaps I had imagined it. But when I glanced back, the shadow had moved closer, now pressed against the inner wall of the tent, and its shape was unmistakably human. Yet there was something wrong. Its head tilted at a fraction too sharp an angle, its arms bent in subtle, unnatural ways. Marcus sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What?" Pointed, voice shaking. "There. The shadow." He followed my gaze, and for a moment his face went pale. The shadow was gone, vanished like mist, leaving only our own forms in the moonlight. "Probably a trick of the fabric," he said. But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe it either. We didn't sleep again. The night dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. I tried to distract myself, counting the soft rustle of leaves outside, the distant hoot of the owl, the far-off sound of running water. But every time I shifted, the second shadow reappeared. Sometimes behind me, sometimes hovering at the tent wall opposite Marcus, always mimicking our positions but always subtly wrong. By dawn, I could feel it pressing in, more substantial than before. Its movements were synchronized with ours, yet delayed, deliberate. When Marcus stood to stretch, I saw it rise before him, arms lifting slightly before his own did, a fraction of a second ahead of him. "I swear," I muttered, clutching the sleeping bag. "It's not just following us, it's anticipating." Marcus didn't respond. He had begun to avoid looking at the walls of the tent, focusing instead on packing our gear with unnatural efficiency. But the air was electric, charged with an invisible weight. Every time we paused, the shadow lingered in our peripheral vision, hovering at impossible angles, shifting as if considering, evaluating. By the time we decided to hike out, the sun was just brushing the tips of the trees with pale gold. The tent, our fragile shelter, seemed heavier now, like a living thing. As I struck the final stake, I caught a movement in the corner of my eye. The second shadow lingered at the tent flap, twisting and stretching, its form blurred but undeniably there. I froze. Marcus glanced back, too, and for the first time he didn't speak. The shadow tilted its head, and I felt a strange recognition, as if it were aware not just of us but of some unspoken truth. It mirrored me perfectly now, every motion, every hesitation, but with subtle differences, small distortions that made my skin crawl. Its presence was quiet, patient, impossibly still despite its mimicry. We left the clearing quickly, the forest reclaiming the tent behind us. I didn't look back, but I felt it, the pressure, the unshakable awareness of being watched. Later, when we stopped for water at a small stream, I realized something terrible. The second shadow didn't vanish with the tent. I glanced down at the reflections in the rippling water, and for a moment, I saw it. Not just behind me, but inside me, crouched, waiting. I tried to dismiss it. Perhaps it was fatigue, the forest playing tricks, or something in the shadows of our own minds. But when I glanced at Marcus, his reflection was perfect. Only mine had that subtle wrongness, that fractional delay, the slight tilt of the head that didn't belong. We returned to civilization silently. The town was quiet, warm, sunlit, ordinary. But every mirror we passed, every reflection in a window, carried the same implication. Two shadows. One ours. One that moved just a fraction offbeat, mimicking perfectly, yet wrong. I haven't told anyone. How do you explain a shadow that isn't yours? One that anticipates your movements. One that waits patiently in the corners of mirrors and windows, in fleeting patches of moonlight, in the reflections of water. At night, I cover the mirrors, turn off the lights, and pray the darkness will remain blank. But I know it doesn't. Somewhere, always, the second shadow waits. It watches, and sometimes when I shift too quickly in bed, I see it, mimicking, always mimicking, waiting for a moment I can't anticipate. I don't know what it wants. I don't know how it knows. All I know is that it exists, and I'm never alone. The forest waits differently at night. It does not breathe. It does not shift in the way we do, but it exerts a presence, a weight that presses into the muscles, into the lungs, into the rhythm of your heartbeat. Marcus and I had come seeking solitude, a few nights far from roads, from civilization, from the low hum of human life. We found a clearing on a slope, circled by trees so tall they swallowed the sky, and the wind here was thinner, colder, sharper than I expected. We pitched our tent on uneven ground, the pegs sinking reluctantly into soil heavy with decades of decay. The smell of wet pine needles clung to our clothing, and a faint mossy scent drifted up from the ground. By the time we gathered kindling, the sun had bled past the horizon, leaving a sliver of violet above the treetops. Silence had descended, not the polite silence of a library, but a living, dense quiet, so tangible it seemed to push against our ribs. Marcus struck flint against steel, sparks landing on dry bark, and the fire caught almost immediately. It was small at first, a timid thing, hissing as it consumed the wood, sending up a thin wisp of smoke that glinted silver in the moonlight. We sat close, the warmth tangible against the cold, pressing our hands to the flickering heat. And that was when I noticed it. The fire seemed aware. At first, it was subtle. The flames shifted in tempo, flickering faster as our own heartbeats accelerated, slowing as our breathing steadied. I laughed, trying to shake the unease, blaming the fatigue of the day, the hunger gnawing in my stomach. Marcus smiled, but he didn't meet my eyes. I sensed the same tension I felt, a hollow echo of dread that neither of us acknowledged aloud. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. Its rhythm matched mine perfectly. My heart beat like a drum mirrored in tiny sparks. I flexed my fingers, shifted my weight, and the fire responded, pulsing more sharply, flaring slightly as if startled. My pulse raced. Marcus's did too. And every time one of us exhaled, a sudden pop from the fire made it feel like the flames had drawn breath with us. I told myself it was coincidence. Physics, chemistry, something mundane. But the forest around us did not behave mundanely. Shadows shifted too deliberately. Branches bent under winds that did not blow. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked. A sound delayed, echoing back to us like a response rather than a natural noise. We ate silently, each motion mirrored in subtle ways by the fire. I lifted a spoon of stew, and sparks rose with it. Marcus leaned forward to drink water, and the flames leaned too, elongating in a ghostly mimicry. My stomach churned. The thought struck me, horrible and immediate. The fire was not reacting. It was responding. Hours crawled by. The cold pressed closer, but we did not seek warmth from the fire beyond necessity. We watched, studied it, afraid to look away. When Marcus shifted in his seat, the fire seemed to tilt in anticipation, flames lancing toward him, jerking like limbs. I banged my fist against the ground, hard, and the fire jumped back, hissing in accord. I tried to speak, to break the tension, but words felt insufficient, slow, and the forest hung on them, swallowing their weight. The night deepened. Moonlight filtered through the branches in irregular shafts, illuminating patches of moss and rock. My pulse began to feel external, as if my heart were not contained within me but spread thin through the forest itself, coursing into the flames, into the shadows, into Marcus. Then came the mirroring. I shifted to adjust my pack. A flicker in the fire mimicked my motion before I completed it. Marcus leaned back. The fire followed. I leaned forward. The flames leaned forward. I froze. Marcus froze. And for a terrifying heartbeat, the fire continued to pulse in perfect rhythm, even though neither of us moved. "Did you move?" I asked, voice low, almost pleading. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No." The fire crackled. A thought struck me like ice water. It knew. Not our presence, not our warmth, it knew our intentions, our subconscious movements, the rhythm of our very flesh. It was learning, watching, waiting, and perhaps even worse, influencing. We tried to ignore it, tried to fall asleep at the edges of its warmth, but the forest refused. Sounds came delayed or sometimes early, always wrong. A snapping branch would echo before it broke. Leaves rustled in response to gestures we hadn't made yet. The fire pulsed with our combined tension, pulsing in a syncopation that felt deliberate, deliberate, deliberate. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of something vast and patient. My heartbeat quickened. Marcus's slowed. The fire adjusted, matching him instead of me. Panic rose. I yanked my hand back, and the fire retreated in a slow recoil, jerking as if startled by my fear. The sensation was electric, a communication I could not understand, yet could not ignore. Hours passed in that unnatural rhythm. The fire mirrored gestures before we made them, anticipated thoughts, matched breathing, skipped beats in deliberate sequence. The forest seemed complicit, every shadow elongating in time with our pulses, every leaf brushing a message into the night. Finally, exhaustion claimed us both. Sleep came fitful, heavy, fractured by the fire's insistence. And then I realized the terrible truth. It was not random. Every flicker, every pulse, every delayed echo, every mirrored gesture. It was communication. Perhaps language, perhaps command. My pulse jumped. I felt it outside myself. Marcus twitched in his sleep, the fire flaring with him, enforcing movements, reminding me of its presence. The pattern was undeniable. I was not just observed. I was coordinated, controlled. I sat upright. The fire crackled sharply in response, hissing almost in delight. My heartbeat slowed. It slowed. The rhythm of the fire followed. I stood. It mimicked. I staggered back, holding my chest. The fire leapt, snapping, flaring, pushing me to the edge of panic. And then the final horror sank in. If it could mirror us, anticipate us, synchronize with our hearts and breaths. What else could it do? How far did this communion extend? Was it still just a fire, or had it reached into us, into the very mechanics of our bodies, our instincts, our will? I wanted to leave, but the forest felt heavier now, the clearing smaller. Each step toward the tent felt preordained, measured. The fire pulsed once, twice, in perfect accord with my racing heart. And I understood with gut-chilling clarity. The rhythm was never ours alone. It had always been its own. It had always been waiting. The sun had yet to rise. The fire's flames flickered orange and blue, perfectly synchronized with my pulse. With Marcus's, with the forest, and somewhere in the spaces between, in the quiet stretches of shadow, I felt it speaking. Not words, not commands, but something worse, an invitation, a claim. And I knew I had already answered.